There we go.
Hey, fishy, fishy, we got a fishy, we got a fishy, we got a fishy. Oh, and I don't have the camera. We got a fishy.
There we go. There we go. All right. Let you go. Hey folks, Glenn May here with BassResource.com, and today I want to talk to you about spring fishing. Spring is kind of a hard time to fish sometimes because occasionally it's like the fish are going to hit anything. You can throw a paper clip out there and they're going to hit it. Other times they don't want to bite anything, and other times you can't even find them. You know, they're here today, gone tomorrow. So what to throw, what to throw, what to throw. It can be confusing trying to figure out what bait to throw. So I've put together this collection of 7 baits that work throughout the entire season. These are my go-to baits that if I'm struggling to catch fish, or if I just want to catch a bunch of fish, depending on the disposition of the fish, these are the baits that I use. These are my confidence baits, so listen up, okay? So let's start right away with the jig. The jig is a kind of a universal lure. I can use it throughout the whole season, but I like the jig during the spring because you can fish it all the way deep, you can fish it completely shallow, and you can fish it at different speeds. Plus, it's available in different head configurations, different sizes, and different colors. Okay, cool. It's universal. However, that actually adds confusion again because a lot of choices, right? So I narrowed it down. Here it is. In the early spring, when the fish are deep, then that's what I'm targeting, things such as drop-offs and steep points, steep banks, creek channels, sunken humps, water that's deeper than 20 feet deep, that are generally positioned in the entrances of those bays and coves where the fish are going to end up spawning. And that's where the fish are going to stop and stack up and get ready to stage before they move shallow. So those are the places I'm going to target. And I'll target it with a jig that's a ½ ounce to 3/4 ounce jig, football head jig specifically. You're that deep, typically there isn't any weeds to get wrapped around the head of the jig, so a football head jig's really good. And I don't really care about having a slow fall. I want to get it on the bottom and maintain contact with the bottom, hence the heavier jig. What I'm doing here is dragging it slowly on the bottom. Just just a slow drag, and what happens is that the football head jig just kind of wobbles back and forth, just like this. And so it looks like a little crawdad crawling on the bottom. Okay, a little protein snack for the fish that are getting ready to eat up for the spawn. I give it pauses in between, and then slowly crawl it again. Just a steady, that's about it. As the water warms up and the fish move up shallower, then I'll move to a 3/8 ounce jig. Here I'm using an Archery style head or a weedless jig, weed jig, which is a cone shaped jig. And I'll throw that into all available cover that I can find. I like to target anything you can see. So it could be laydowns, that could be rocks, scattered rocks, chunk rocks, could be stumps. Even docks are really good. If you have an Archery jig on there, you can skip a jig up underneath the dock really well. All those areas where the fish are going to be getting ready for the spawn. So they'll be either right on the drops next to the flats or on the flats in that cover. And especially if a front's come through, which often happens in the spring, that's when a jig really shines because I can flip and pitch it right into that cover. Or if you get a lot of rain and the water levels rise and it floods some of the shoreline shrubs and bushes and timber, man, a jig is a really good way to pull them out of that cover. So that's when I start flipping and pitching. For the spawn, I'll take that jig and I like to swim it over the top of the bed. Sometimes it gets a strike just by a reaction strike, bringing it over the top of the bed. Or I'll drag it over and I like to hop it through the bed. You gotta be real careful when you do that. If there are eggs on the bed, I prefer not to do that because I don't want to disturb the nest and I don't want to damage any of the eggs. But if they haven't laid eggs yet, then bringing it across the bed like that, sometimes, crawdads is a natural predator, and bass will strike it. I only ask that if you do catch fish off beds that you release them right away so they can finish the spawn and do their thing so they can have a productive spawn. Following the spawn, post-spawn, jig again, same thing in those flats where they were at before, any available cover, any of the drops adjacent to flats, You find any kind of flooded bushes, trees, weeds, things like that, it's a great place to throw a jig. As for colors, I typically stay to the browns and the green hues. I really don't change too much other than that, unless I get real muddy water, and then I'll use a black and chartreuse jig. But typically it's a brown color or a green pumpkin type colored jig. That's what I use the most. My gear tends to change a little bit. When I'm fishing deeper in the early part of the spring, here I'm using a medium heavy, 7-foot medium heavy rod, fast action, and I'm using a BassResource Seaguar fluorocarbon BassResource line 20-pound test. I do that because most of the time I'm pulling it over rocks, and fluorocarbon does a better job as far as abrasion resistance than braid. So I like to use a BassResource that's geared for this kind of stuff. It's a perfect combination. And I'll use it on a reel that's like a 7:3-to-1 reel. The gear ratio doesn't really matter because I'm fishing it really slow. Now as the spring progresses and I'm now fishing it shallow and flipping and pitching, now I'm using a heavier, stouter rod and gear. I'm using a 7.2 to 7.4 foot heavy power rod with a fast action tip. I'm spooling it up with 50-pound Seaguar smackdown braid with a 7:3-to-1 gear ratio. Sometimes I'll knock it down to a 6.8 or a 6.6 gear ratio if I'm really going into heavy cover because I want to wrench those fish out, so I want a lower gear ratio. But I'm doing a lot of flipping and pitching and all kinds of cover, so that's when I bring out that heavy gear and the heavy braid. And that's about it. That's a perfect setup. Those are jigs. Let's move on to the next bait, and that is a lipless crankbait. I love fishing lipless crankbaits in the spring. Something about them, that tight wiggle and that rattling action, the fish just key on during this time of the year, so it's an excellent time to use it. But also, the fish are on the move here. They're moving from shallow to deep or deep to shallow water, so you got to have a search bait handy to be able to find those fish. And a rattling lipless crankbait, that's the ticket. Now, what I do early in the season is I'm throwing a heavier one. I'm throwing a 3/4 ounce rattling crankbait, and I like to get that down deep in the same areas when I was targeting the jig, and I want to pull it along there, keep it towards the bottom. So instead of holding the rod up and cranking it like you normally do a crankbait, here I'm holding it to the side and I do a sweeping action. And I pause and I reel up and I sweep again, okay? That keeps the bait down on the bottom, but also when you pause it, it flutters down. It's got this wiggle action as it falls, and that often elicits a strike. So it's a great way to fish those deep water structure areas early in the season. As the season progressed, now I like to take a 1/2 ounce bait, move up a little bit lighter, and I'm paralleling weed lines, I'm paralleling creek channels, I'm paralleling the shoreline. That works really well as covering the flats. Those fish get up on the flats, getting closer to spawn, and I just like to cover flats with this bait, especially over weedy flats that may have an occasional stump or a rock in the middle of it, a rock pile or a lay down. During the spawn, I'll bring it over the tops of beds, and sometimes you can get a reaction strike on that, just bring it, especially with smallmouth. If you bring it right over the top of a smallmouth bed, a lot of times they'll strike it right away out of reaction. Then in the post-spawn, again, cover those flats. Lots of fan casting, just like you did during the pre-spawn, and you can have yourself a heyday with these. These fish start to get really aggressive and want to feed up after recovering after the spawn, so it can be a really good bait to throw. As for colors, typically, well, if I were going to pick one color for the entire spawn, it'd be red. You know, a red lipless crankbait, man, it's hard to beat. I don't know what it is, but these fish love red lipless crankbaits. So if I was going to pick one color, this is going to be it. However, I do change it up based upon water clarity. Typically, if the water's really clear, then I like to go with natural color baits. So here I'm using like a crawdad color or bream, you know, bluegill, bream kind of pattern, or perch, something like that. But natural color baits is what I want to use when the water's clear. If there's a little bit of stain to it, then I'll go with a gold color bait like that. Okay, that works really well if you got the water's a little bit of color to it, less than 3 feet visibility or so. Then that works really well. Up to 8 feet visibility, actually 3 to 8. I meant to say 3 to 8. And then when the water's really muddy, say for example you've had a lot of rains come through and that water dirties up, then I throw some chartreuse in it. So baits like this work really well when you got that chocolate milk kind of color. That's what I throw. As for the gear, I'm using the same gear throughout the entire season, really. I'm using a crankbait rod. So it's a 7 foot or 7 2 foot, yeah, 7 foot 2 inch a moderate power rod, and I have that paired up with 12-pound Invisix fluorocarbon line. Usually when I'm fishing real shallow, I got the Invisix fluorocarbon line, and when I'm fishing really deep, I'll use Tatsu. Typically because the Tatsu line is more limber, I can cast further, and it allows me to get that bait way out there and get it down deeper. But you can just use Invisix if you want to cast really well. Just 12-pound works fine. If you're fishing around a lot of heavy cover, a lot of stumps and rocks and things like that, then I might bump that up and maybe use 17-pound, 15 to 17-pound line. But typically a 12-pound works really well. And the reel is a faster gear ratio, 7:9 to 1 gear ratio. So those are my lipless crankbaits. Now, the next bait that I like to use is a Senko, you know, a soft plastic stick bait. That is really good in the spring, especially when the fish are in a neutral to negative feeding mode. That's when this bait really shines. Early in the season, I'm fishing, again, those same spots, those deep points, those rock bluffs, those drop-offs, those steep banks, creek channels, humps, things like that that are near the entrances of those bays. And here I'm using light gear. I want to put it on a split shot rig. And I got 2 feet of line behind it because what I want is the action of that bait falling. So I give it a lot of extra line. They're 2 feet, sometimes longer. I don't want that weight to be pulling down on the bait here. I want it to fall naturally. So I just use a small lift and drop action. What I mean by small, I'm not lifting it up 6 feet. I'm lifting it up 2 or 3 feet and dropping it again and just letting it flutter down on its own. I'm using a medium powered 7-foot spinning rod with 6-pound Tatsu line, fluorocarbon line, real light stuff. Now, by the way, quick little tip, you can also throw this on a drop shot rig. Okay, a Senko, little 3-inch Senko on a drop shot rig can be really deadly if the fish really are reluctant to bite, say a big front came through. Works really well. Now, as the temperatures warm up and the fish start to move shallow, then I'll change it all up. Now I'm throwing a 4 to 5-inch Senko with a 2-watt extra wide gap Gamakatsu hook, thin wire hook, and I'm throwing it around every kind of visible cover I can. Right? You want to throw it at those bushes and at those laydowns, and at the stumps, the rocks, and the edges and drops of flats. Skip it up under docks. This can be really productive if the fish are really buried up in the weeds. You can fish it right along the edge of those and entice them out. That nice, subtle, it's a weightless rig. I'm not putting any weights on it, so it just has this slow, enticing, horizontal fall to it. And that gets a lot of reluctant bass to bite. So it can be a real killer technique. During the spawn, again, I like to drift it up over the top of those beds and just let it slowly settle right down on the bed and then lift it back up. A lot of times you do that multiple repeated casts, bass are going to go after and nail it. They're going to get tired of that thing bugging them. And then in the post-spawn, this can be really productive. Again, if they get up underneath those docks or they get up against some of that cover or those wide open flats, you just drift it across those flats. As for colors, I tend to use green pumpkin all the time. If I could use one color of a Senko, it would be green pumpkin. The only time really I change that color is if the water's really muddied up and dirty, then I'll go to a June bug color. Or if the water's super clear, then I might go to a smoke color with some pepper flake in it. But 80-85% of the time, it's green pumpkin. It works so well that I don't really need to. I know they make hundreds of colors, over 100 colors in this bait, but you don't need to go too hog wild with colors. And as far as gearing, now I told you about the spinning outfit when I'm fishing deep, but when I'm fishing up in those shallow areas, now I'm using a 6'10" medium power rod, fast action tip. Pair with that, I've got 15-pound Invisix fluorocarbon line. And I got that for a couple reasons. A little bit more limber rod because it's a lighter lure. It's easier to cast with a limber rod. Plus I've got that thin wire hook on it, so I don't need a lot of backbone to set the hook. I actually want a little bit of give so the fish doesn't rip that hook out of his mouth. I'm using Invisix fluorocarbon line, again, because that line, it falls about the same rate as the bait, so it doesn't impede the action of the bait, and it's less visible to the fish. It's a slow presentation. You don't want to give them a whole lot of time to examine things, but if they are examining it, I really don't want them to focus on that line. So I'm not using braid, I'm using this Invisix. And that's it. That's it for Senkos. That's a great bait to use throughout all of spring. So let's move to the next bait. That is a spinnerbait. I like to use spinnerbaits a lot. I've been throwing them for decades now as one of my go-to baits, my confidence bait. I'm telling you guys, I talk to a lot of guys who don't have a lot of confidence in spinnerbaits, don't catch a lot of fish on it, and you can catch fish on spinnerbaits year-round, but if there's ever a prime time to throw a spinnerbait, it's right now, in the spring. That's the best time to throw it. So if you want to get some confidence in this bait, you want to learn how to use it, now's the time. Break it out, tie it on, okay? Let me tell you how to use it. In the early spring, I'm fishing deep in the same areas I was targeting with the other baits. Here I want to get it down deep, so I'm using a 3/4 ounce bait with a Colorado blade on it. I'm getting it down 20 plus feet deep, and here I'm just slowly cranking it along the bottom, just slowly turning that handle. Just keep doing it that way. You just feel that big Colorado blade just thump, 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 thumping along on your rod tip, and that's what the fish key on. The thing is, you got to be awake when you're fishing it this way, because a lot of times the bite is subtle. They don't come crashing in and let you know they've got it, especially when it's that far out and that deep. Here, you just might, that thump, thump, thump might stop. Or you're feeling a thump, 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 and it changes to a thud, thud, thud. Okay, it's a subtle difference, or the cadence of that will do a little hiccup. It just changed, thump, 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 right? Just a little thing like that, that could indicate that a fish has it. So pay attention, don't fall asleep with this bite. A lot of people miss bites that way, so pay close attention when you're fishing it this deep and you'll catch a lot more fish. Now, as the spring progresses, and the fish it's warming up, the fish are coming up shallow. Now I'll fish that same 3/4 ounce bait, but now I'm using double Indiana blades on it. That is ideal for the spring. That's my go-to bait right there. And I like to cover a lot of water with it. Now if I want to cover big flats, just like with the Lipless crankbaits, and I need to connect with fish, I'm using a search bait, then I'll fan cast it across flats, trying to connect with them. Here I just want to keep it over the top of those weeds, but sometimes you can bring it back really fast and get a bulge under the surface, and sometimes that elicits a strike, draws them out of those weeds. They don't have much time to think about it when it's moving that quick, so they just react. But often I like to fish it around things that I can see. So I'm throwing right along laydowns, I'm throwing around stumps, around rocks, docks, and especially when you get a heavy rain and the water rises and it floods that shoreline, man, oh man, that is prime time for spinnerbaits. Here I'm target casting, I like to get it right up against the tree, get it right up against the stump, throw it right into that shrub, get it into that cover. It's short cast, pinpoint accuracy, great way to fish a spinnerbait. Now, during the spawn, it's very similar to those Lipless crankbaits. Bring it over the top of those beds, you can get a reaction strike. The first cast or two, if you bring it right over it, especially the smallmouth, will come up and nail it, or they'll at least show themselves. Sometimes you're not sure where the beds are. It's a good way to get those bass to rise up and look at it. Now you know there's a bed there, and then you can go after it with a different bait. So it's a great search type bait to use during the spawn. During the post spawn, again, fish those flats the same way I just mentioned earlier. For the pre-spawns, you fish it the same manner during the post spawn. As for colors, I use white with a white trailer, twin tail trailer, pretty much all the time. That's my primary go-to color with the gold blades. There you go. That's my main combination. Now, if the water gets really muddy, then I might put on a chartreuse trailer or a white chartreuse skirt, give it a little more color to it. And if the water's really clear, then I'll switch up those Indiana blades and put on a double willow leaf silver color, because here I just want more flash and more traction that way than I do need any kind of vibration to it. And that's it. I don't have any other colors or types of spinnerbaits in my box. As for rods, it's the same rod and reel and setup I'm using throughout the entire season. That is a 7-foot medium heavy fast action rod paired with 15-pound Invisix fluorocarbon line with a 7:9 gear ratio reel. Same thing throughout the entire season. All right, so let's move on. Next, what I like to throw is a frog, a hollow body frog. Well, now wait a minute. What about during the early spring when the fish are deep? How the heck does a hollow body frog work, Glenn? Well, it's one of my secret little baits. One of the things you got to keep in mind during particularly the early spring of the season here, you sometimes get those warming days, kind of a false spring I like to call it, where you get 3 or 4 nice days, steady warm temperatures. What happens during that time is, even though it's really early in the season and you still think a lot of fish are deep, those fish will rise up, they'll come up shallow. Why? Because the bait fish do. The bait fish seek warmer temperatures and the bass will follow. So you get a couple of nice days of warm weather and those fish will come up shallow, and that's when they're susceptible to a frog. So keep one tied on. I've caught fish off frogs in water temps at below 50 degrees because you pay attention to those trends and you can capitalize on it. Now, you don't fish it like you normally do in the summertime, so you got to fish it slow. Subtle twitches. Just a little subtle twitch or two, and just let it sit and let the rings dissipate. Give it some slack line, let it sit on its own, then give it another little twitch. You're not making a big ruckus here. The fish, when they come up shallow first part of the season, are skittish. And you make a lot of noise with this bait and you're just going to spook them. So subtle approach is key to that, but you can get them on those hollow body frogs doing it this time of year. You'd be surprised how many you can catch. And I still keep that bait tied on throughout the entire spring. I catch fish on frogs in the low 50s, when the water temperature is in the low 50s, all the way through post-spawn. All I do is I change the way that I'm fishing it. Early in the season, I'm not twitching it as hard, and I'm leaving longer pauses in between those twitches. By the time I get to post-spawn, I'm moving it really quick. Twitch, 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 barely even a pause in between, every once in a while just to give it a little hiccup in it. As for colors, well, basically a natural looking color like this one. Okay, this is a Fish Labs frog, by the way. But notice it's got that brown color. It looks like a natural color frog. I like the white belly to it. So typically with me, any color that looks like a frog, that's got the green or the brown hues with a white belly, that's good. That's what I stick with. And as for gear, I'm using the same gear throughout the season. Here I'm using my frogging outfit. So I'm using a 7'4" to 7'6" heavy power rod with a fast action tip. I'm spooling that up with 50-pound Seagar Smackdown braid on a 7:9 to gear ratio reel. And that is golden, man. That you can throw that frog over any kind of cover, any kind of structure. You throw it around stumpy fields, you can put it along docks, you can give it over weeds, flooded timber, bushes, anything like that. You get a monster bass on, and the first thing they do, they grab it and dive right back down those weeds, or wrap it around a dock post or around a tree or something. You need that strong, stout gear to be able to get them out. So that's what I use throughout the entire season. Easy peasy. Now, the next lure that I like to use is a toad. Now, a lot of people like to categorize frogs and toads the same way, and I do too sometimes. I sometimes categorize similar, but the difference is with a solid-bodied toad is that they sink. So here I'm using a little bit, and they've got these big, these legs on them that flap around, make a lot of vibration and noise. So use those characteristics to your advantage. Typically what I do is I rig them up like this. I put them on a keel-weighted hook that's got a screw lock in the front. Here, this is a 1/4 ounce hook here that I'm using. Just rig it weedless. And what I do early in the season is I literally fish it in the same places in the same way that I do a jig. Just crawl it on the bottom, barely moving it with some long pauses in between. The difference here is that this is a bulkier bait, and the legs have a little bit of movement to it. So every once in a while, I'll give it a little pop, little twitch, just to get those legs to flutter a little bit, along with dragging it along. And just that little different look is sometimes all it takes is to get those fish to bite when everybody else around you is throwing jigs. This is a good substitute for it. It works really well when those fish are in those deep structure areas, staging up, getting ready for the spawn. But as the season progresses and the fish move up shallower, now you got two different ways you can fish it. One of them is I like to fish it just under the surface and swimming along over the tops of weeds, swimming along the edges of channels, swimming along banks and steep banks, along those drop-offs, along those flats where it drops off to deeper water, weed lines, things like that, just under the surface. And even as a search bait, you can go across those big flats and swim it under the surface right over those weeds. And a lot of times you get a bite with that. But also another way that I fish it is like I do with a jig. I literally flip and pitch this in the same kind of cover where I'm pitching and flipping jigs. In that shallow cover, when the water gets rises and it floods those bushes and those reeds and all that, flip that toad in there just the same way you do a jig. Again, rigged the same way with that keel-weighted hook, but this is a bulkier bait, and it has a slower fall with those legs that are flapping as it falls, and a lot of times the bigger fish will go after it that way. Especially, again, if a lot of people around you are throwing jigs, use this as a substitute and you can catch a lot more fish that way. During the spawn, again, bring it over the tops of their heads just like you would with a spinnerbait or a lipless crankbait. And then during the post spawn, this is when it really shines. Now it is toad time. Because here, I'll bring it on the surface. I like to bring it down quick enough where the legs are gurgling and kicking along the surface, just giving a nice little bubbly action. You want a bubble trail behind it. Just gurgle along, just a straight cast and retrieve. You don't need to do anything special. Sometimes I'll give it a little pop and twitch just to give it a little bit of different erratic action. But cast it out there and just cover water and let it gurgle and bring it alongside those docks, bring it around those stumps and those laydowns, those type of things, and this bait does surprisingly well in the post spawn. So guys, don't wait to break out toads and frogs until the summer. They work really well during the springtime, I promise you. Okay, the next bait that I like to use, it's the last one, but certainly not the least, and that is a tube. I'm a big fan of tubes. I've been fishing them since they came out in the mid-'80s, and I've been fishing them a lot since then. I always have them tied on in some shape or form. Often I have multiple tubes tied on in different rigs while I'm out there fishing to cover different scenarios. So, because I use them throughout the year. Now, the key thing about in the spring is a couple different ways to fish it. First of all, when they're really deep, I go back to that spinning outfit I was using before, and here I'm using a medium power 7-foot rod with 6-pound Tatsu line on and I'm using a split shot rig. Here I don't need such a long leader on it like I did with the Senkos. I'm using maybe an 18-inch, a 12 to 18-inch leader on it, and I'm dragging it on the bottom. I don't need to lift and pump it here and move it really quick. Just drag it on the bottom with long pauses in between. This has a smaller profile and less action than any of the other baits that I mentioned, so when the fish are really reluctant to bite, this is the ideal bait to use for those conditions. You can eke out a few bites when it's a tough day of fishing using this technique. The tube works really well as a drop shot bait too. Don't hesitate to use it as a drop shot. It looks like a little bait fish down the lower part of the water column. Again, fishing it really slow, so don't give the rod a lot of shaking action and lifting and hopping it. Sometimes just holding it there and letting the waves lap against that line is all you need to give it a little bit of action of that bait down below to get a fish to bite. So don't overwork it when it's really cold and the fish are really deep. Now, as the season progresses and the fish move up shallow, this is when I really like to use a tube as a flipping bait. So I'll put it on a trocar tube bait hook, and I'll rig it with a bullet sinker and a bobber stopper, and I'm using a flipping stick basically, or pitching stick. So a 7.2 to 7.4 heavy power rod with a fast action tip. I'm using 50-pound Seagar smackdown braid, and I'm using a strong reel like a 7.3 to 1 gear ratio or lower. And here I like to flip and pitch it at anything I can see. It's a lay down or next to a stump, or maybe there's some rock piles, and it works especially well when the water rises and it floods all that shoreline. You flip it into those bushes and into those reeds. Those fish like to get up in those reeds during pre-spawn and close to spawn. You can get a tube in there better than most of the other baits because it doesn't have a lot of tentacles to get wrapped on those reeds and get stuck in them. You can get a tube in there and get the fish out without any problems. So that's a real good bait to use for that. You can skip it under docks really well. It's a very effective bait to use. As for colors, I really stick to one main color. I'm using a green pumpkin. Green pumpkin plastic is hard to beat. So that's the primary color that I use. Now, if the water gets really dingy and gets muddy, then I'll go to a dark bait. This is almost black. It's a dark smoke with some gold flake in it. I'll use that when the water gets really muddy. And if the water's really clear, then I'll go to a translucent color, something like this. This is a clear or smoke color with some copper pepper flake in there. That works really well if the water's super clear. That's about it. I don't really get too crazy with the different tube colors. Again, I've been fishing them for decades. I've tried a lot of different colors, but those seem to be my 3 main go-to colors that I use throughout the spring. So I hope those tips help. For more tips and tricks like this, visit BassResource.com.